it's very important to dismantle the idea of velayat faqih, because essentially it's allowed Khomeini and those who have come after him to do whatever they want with impunity and just say, look, I'm doing God's work. I'm the representative of the Messiah and I stand above you. And it creates this division between the divine and the human sphere, as well as this division between the masculine and the feminine and the rational and the emotional and all of these things, which just perpetuates unhappiness, I find. So it's like, so the most important thing to do in my mind is to translate the protests in Iran's streets into constitutional change. And that constitutional change necessarily means addressing theological questions. And those theological questions necessarily mean the separation of the clergy from Iranian politics. And that in turn means a reversal of over thousands of years of political history that revolves around the divine rights of kings, right? And now the divine rights of clerics. And this is a major negotiation about the nature of knowledge and the end of sovereignty and of law and of man's place in the universe. When you look at the protests that are taking place now, you realize that they're taking place outside structures that are established, outside the state, outside the bureaucracy, outside the economy, outside media. That clearly there is an instinct for survival that's at work around the world. And when that instinct is triggered somehow by these death systems and structures, then you kind of see an instant and extensive convergence of people and ideas and talents and possibilities. There's an organic quality to them, and they shift our consciousness and perception of who we are and how we relate to each other on the planet. And I think these movements are pose a real possibility for us to become life-oriented. I think that's at the heart of everything. It's to make this shift from what I think is a death-oriented world, in which I include, essentially all forms of idolatry, if you will, from the worship of money to the worship of states to the worship of religion. All these idols that are supposedly there to secure us are actually causing and are the source of our anxieties and our insecurity. And so I think that, in a way, it goes back to, Abraham's hammer, that we need to be very aware that most of what we construct on the earth is essentially projections of ourselves into material form, whatever that material form can takes, into economic and material form or political form. And these formulations of man, I don't think are adequate to the kind of challenge that we face. And I think that, oddly enough, the less that we do, the more that we free up the world for others, the more we create space for others. You don't have to plant, the Amazon is its own system. The oceans are their own system. And, we can certainly learn to trust and understand those systems better. But but life is here and it's happening. And I think that if we just dial things down a little bit and cool it, I think it will create space for other ways and forms of being. But I think we need to find these other ways and forms of being. A friend of mine, Hirad, has this whole project called the fourth sector, about the fourth sector, where he's basically saying that we need new organizations that operate with a different set of metrics in the world, so that what we measure is not, so that what we measure is provides a correct assessment of what we're doing. So for instance, I think everybody, for example, everybody looks to the stock market, including my mom sometimes, as this source of salvation, right? But if you just reduce the stock market to, I don't know, tuna fish, let's say, right? And, you have, there are all these tuna in the sea that you don't know about because you don't measure them. But if you have the tuna corporation, then you're measuring, okay, I caught 10 tuna fish today, and that's 12,000 cans or however many. And that's the stock, right? That's the stock. That's where the money is. That's where the metric is. So what we're actually worshiping is it's not the ocean. What we're actually seeing, we're not even seeing the tuna fish. We're not even seeing the tuna in the can. We're just seeing the stock price of tuna in the stock market. And that's where we're investing our faith. So naturally, the tuna fishermen have to go and find more tuna fish and more tuna fish and more tuna fish. And they have to find better ways of selling it and marketing it and all of this. And this generates a hunger for tuna. That's like a desire for tuna that maybe, I don't know, 100 years ago wouldn't even exist because people didn't even think about having tuna in, I don't know, in a restaurant in Utah, So I do think that the markets need to have a correction, shall we say, if not a collapse. So that, and it hasn't to do with like revolution. It has to do with shifting perspectives and perceptions of what constitutes profit and what constitutes loss, right? As long as we have those measurements so fundamentally incorrect, so that we're willing to kill the very last tuna, as we've killed many of the very lasts, because it's profit, and we neglect the fact that we're not allowing future generations to experience the richness that we have experienced, then obviously we're not, like, our thinking hasn't evolved in a way that's good. And then because the tuna guy has a mortgage and he's gone and bought an expensive house or a Mercedes, he needs to make sure that there's a constant flow of dead tuna that he can convert into dollars that he can deposit into the mouth of whatever bank to cover his interest payments so he doesn't lose his house. So at the core of it, everybody lives with this fear that at any point in time, if their incomes collapse, they will become refugees and homeless. They will be evicted. And so I think fundamentally then that takes us back to our ideas of time as this parking meter that we've created that's always ticking against us, right? We're always running out of time. And wherever we go, whether we're parking our car or whether we're renting a hotel or even going to see a movie, whatever we do, we're always putting these coins in the jaws of these little sacrificial time idols, right? And the sacrificial time idol says, okay, Amir, you're allowed to park here for 2 hours. And I'm watching you in this space for 2 hours. And if you don't come back, then I'm going to bite you. I'll slice a chunk of your skin and you'll have to pay me, I don't know, $100 fine. I'll put a trap on your car so you'll be paralyzed, and I'll tow it too. And so, so what I'm trying to say is that schizophrenia, in a way, is built into the structure of time. It's just built into it. And people don't think that way, but I think so. So, so you're not allowed to grab the parking meter and bang it and bash it. And, if anybody said to me, Amir, what do you want to really wrestle? I would say I would like to wrestle with a parking meter, with time, because it's this serpent that, is unleashed in 1,000 ways into our lives and into our consciousness. And, it's going to tick, 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 and then it strikes, and then it releases pain. Right now in Utah, it's really nice because there's plenty of parking, there's space, and so the parking meter issues and so on. But I'm just saying that when we look at things like the homeless crisis, and a lot of the homeless people say are schizophrenic and so on. I don't actually think so. I think that once people choose not to participate in the systems and structures of time, then then one way or another you're dealing with pain, because time is also a way of distributing pain, right? The pain comes in the form of punishment in terms of fines, comes in the form of prison sentences in terms of years, whatever. But so I think the central task that I've set for myself anyway, and which I think all of us have to a large extent, is to think about time, because it's all our constructions of order and authority revolve around time. You go to the bank, you stick in your card, and it gives you money. And then if it doesn't recognize you and it doesn't give you the money, it's a schizophrenic moment, right? Because your identity is actually held by the bank, and your movement is actually also governed by the bank. They look at you and they say, okay, you are Amir, here is your $100 back or whatever. But then they can also freeze you out of time, impose a sanction, if you will, and then you're stuck, and then you're stuck, and then you don't have this system of mirrors around you that somehow upholds an image or identity or an abstraction of you that allows you to reconnect with yourself in different things. I mean, in a way, it's the most beautiful and brilliant of inventions, but it can't be allowed to take over and become the source of how we think and relate to each other. So I think the central problem in terms of responding to the crises we have is to push the pause button on all these calendars that are swirling, we're swirling in, right? The corporation guy, the poor guy has to like, oh, it's the quarterly report, I have to prove this. The kid has his exam coming, oh, right, deadlines, 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 deadlines. It's like, why don't we just push the pause button on time everywhere and reframe our conceptions of space and money and relations around an idea of time that's life-oriented and not death-oriented. So Artemis, if I die tomorrow, here is my legacy to you. This is what I think. This is what I think. And I also think these time machines, these time structures, elections are obviously structures of time. Profits are bound to structures of time. Money and debt is bound to structures of time. Homework is bound to structures of time, right? I mean, all forms of organization ultimately revolve around our ideas of time. And those ideas of time, in the end, one way or another, are abstractions of ourselves. And that are projected into the future. So what I'm trying to say is that one of the ways in which to change the world is to rethink about what our idea of the future really means. What is it bound to? What governs this notion that, okay, there will be a future? What if there is no future? What if we just push the pause button on all these clocks? I know that it implies chaos. And most people prefer order, prefer things to be predictable. But I think that it also allows for life to happen and appear before us in ways that we can't usually perceive. And I think that's a very exciting thing. So yeah, that's it.